I hate hummingbirds. Said no one ever. I love hummingbirds. And who doesn't? I think they are one of the animals that just have this captivating presence on all of us. They are amazing. We are talking about hummingbirds today and one of their favorite flowers here in the southeast where I live, trumpet vine, but I've got a list of 10 plants you can grow in your garden to encourage hummingbirds, to feed the hummingbirds. We are talking about pollinators all week. My name is Amy Landers. I'm with Gardens That Matter, where we help families create beautiful, bountiful gardens together. My arm's getting a little tired, so we're just going to set this back here for the moment. We'll come back to that. We've been talking about pollinators the last couple weeks, and we are going to cap it all off tomorrow night with a big workshop. So it's on Friday night, June 9th. 9 p.m. Eastern. If you can join us live, I would love to see you there. There's a link to sign up in the description of this video. If you can't make it live, there is a complimentary free replay for 24 hours. So go ahead and sign up and I'll send you the link to it. We are going to talk about creating a pollinator paradise in your yard. Now, if you want to learn more about some pollinators and some plants you can grow, check out our video page here at Gardens That Matter, and you'll find a playlist with all of our pollinator plant pairings that we've done over the last couple weeks. It's been a lot of fun, and so today is hummingbirds and trumpet vine. We've got one more tomorrow, which is one of my favorites, somebody who is often an animal which is often overlooked. So tune in tomorrow about noon and find out what that is. But today, let's talk about hummingbirds. All right, I've got my notes here so I don't forget anything because they're amazing. They're amazing. So we'll talk about the pollinator first, and then we'll talk about the plant. And in this case, 10 possible plants. And a little bit more in depth about the trumpet vine. All right, so hummingbirds start off as an egg the size of like a navy bean, like that big or smaller, right? I didn't have any navy beans in my cabinet. So I had rice. No, it's too small, right? So navy bean sized egg. And then they hatch, of course, and the parents feed them for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then they're ready to fly. And they have those beautiful iridescent feathers, especially the males. And so those, of course, are used to attract a mate and to identify species between species. They identify that because hummingbirds tend to be really territorial. And one of the reasons is they need a lot of nectar. One of the articles I was reading as I was preparing was talking about how they're only hours away from starvation, which is crazy to think about, right? They're only hours away from starvation. But you start to think about how a hummingbird works. They are beating their wings so fast, like 90 beats per second, 90 flaps per second. I mean, faster than we can see with our eye, right? Even where photographers have done like a super fast camera snap action shot of hummingbirds, often they still have a little bit of a blur, right? Because those wings are moving fast, about 90 beats per second. And then they can fly up to 60 miles per hour, which is incredible as well. So these are animals that are moving fast. And their hearts during the day are beating fast. So their hearts can beat up to 1,260 beats per minute. 1,260 beats per minute. That's during the day when they're active, when they're flying, when they're being territorial, when they're gathering, foraging for nectar. Then at night, their heartbeat slows way down, closer to 100 beats per minute, and they kind of are in they call it torpor. So they're kind of like little hummingbird zombies. So they have to have a safe place to nest or to perch at night, like most birds do, right? Because they're more vulnerable at night. So in your yard, when you're thinking about hummingbirds, you can start to think about how to create great habitat for them. So they're gonna need some nice thick growth, like shrubs, bushes, small trees, where they have that shelter for their nests, for their night roosts. They're gonna need lots of flowers, and I've got examples of those for you. You may end up hanging up some feeders, especially if you have a lot of hummingbirds, because the territoriality will mean that there's a lot of fights happening if you just have one feeder. So you may end up, if you really want to encourage hummingbirds in your yard, you may end up having multiple feeders. And then you want to think about what you're putting into the feeder. So I've got the recipe for you as well. So let's do, I'm like making sure, let's talk about the feeder next, because that's important. So hummingbirds are such a fun one that we can encourage with kind of man-made ways, right? Like we can put this out and encourage them to come in addition to the things that we're planting. And then we can put them right beside our window or right beside our deck where we can really watch. And that is really fun when we can kind of design something that lets us have that peek into what's going on. So if you just want to do hummingbird feeder and you want to make your own nectar, it's super simple. You just need 4 parts water to 1 part sugar, and you want to use cane sugar. So 4 parts water to 1 part sugar. If you were using like a 4-cup measuring glass, which would actually make too much for this. So let me think about what I would do for this. So I would actually use, I can't remember how much it takes to fill this one up, but like, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use 4 parts water, 4 cups of water, and I'm going to use 1 cup of sugar, and then I'm going to bring that to a boil on my stove just to make sure it's sterile beginning, like from the start. Make sure there's nothing growing in there to start with. Then I'm going to pour into this, and I would make sure that this was clean to start with as well. So if I needed to, I might like take it apart. At the beginning of the season, I always like take everything apart, wash it really well. I might even put it in boiling water for a little while, as long as I'm not going to melt anything, to make sure that it's clean to start off with. And then I'm going to fill this up, and then I'm going to have some extra, right? Because I just made more than 4 cups, and that's more than can fit in here. This is probably, might be a quart, fits in here, right? So, well, that would hold, sorry, I should not try to do like volume calculations live on video. Maybe this is like a half quart, and 4 cups would be a quart, a little more than a quart with the sugar. Anyway, what am I going to do with that extra? I'm going to store it in the fridge. Okay, so you're gonna bring it to a boil, cool it off, fill your feeder, put the extra in the fridge, and it will keep fine in the fridge, no problem. And then you're gonna put it out. And depending on if the hummingbirds are in your area yet, or if they found your yard yet, how much natural forage you have, it may take a little while for them to find it, but usually they will find it. And then you're gonna want to keep an eye on it, because if they don't drink it all within 3 days, you're going to want to change it out in 3 days, because it can start to ferment, and nobody wants a tipsy hummingbird. It's dangerous for the hummingbird. Probably could be dangerous for you too, to have a tipsy hummingbird flying around your yard. I don't know. It actually could be like lethal for the bird. So you want to make sure you're keeping your feeders clean. So if they're not drinking it in 3 days, you want to go ahead and dump that out. You can just pour it on the ground. It'll feed bacteria on the ground, no problem. Throw it in your compost pile, the extra liquid. Then wash it out again. You probably don't need to bring it all the way to a boil again, but just wash it well, rinse it, and then refill it from there. All right, so that is going to help keep the hummingbirds that you are feeding yourself healthy, because you're going to give them healthy food. And now we want to think about how to feed them with flowers. Now, hummingbirds are important pollinators. They are not like they aren't moving huge amounts of pollen like you can think about our bees that are like packing pollen and their whole fuzzy body is pollen. But if you think about that head is nice and full of feathers, it's going to catch lots of pollen when the hummingbird sticks its face into a flower. And so hummingbird flowers often will have their pollen. So a lot of times they're tube shaped. So here's my tube. I guess I should have made a pretend flower for you to look at, right? So let's pretend like this is the flower. So up here might be where the stamens are, so that when the hummingbird comes to feed, the pollen is getting on the top of the hummingbird's head. And then they're going to go to the next flower, and they'll transfer the pollen to the female parts of the flower, to the stigma and the style, down to the ovary. So important work there. And in return, the flower is going to give them the nectar they need to power that amazing energy they have, right? So the flowers are super important, giving them nice energy-rich nectar that's going to give them the energy they need to have that 90 beats per second flap, right? I can't even, can you even do anything 90 beats per second? I don't think, we can't move that fast, I don't think. Maybe something in our bodies is moving that quickly, but yeah, crazy. And then they also, hummingbirds will hover. So these flowers tend to not have a landing pad. So a lot of flowers that are butterfly flowers or bee flowers will have a little landing pad where they can come in to land and to stand while they feed. But a hummingbird flower doesn't need that. So they're often going to have that trumpet shape, no landing pad. And some of them are fragrant, but it's not for the hummingbirds because hummingbirds don't have a really strong sense of smell. So they don't necessarily need fragrance for that. So those flowers that are fragrant have either been developed by us to be fragrant, like we've selected as humans, we've selected the fragrant ones, or they're also attracting other pollinators that do find fragrance attracting, okay? And then what color are hummingbird flowers? Do you guys know? When you see hummingbird flowers, what do you think of? Or when you think of hummingbird flowers, what do you think of? What color do we always put on our hummingbird feeders? Red. Oh, which actually is a good question. Do you need to make your water red in your hummingbird feeder? You don't have to. They'll find it. This red on the feeder will help them see, you know, like it'll help them notice it. But hummingbirds will actually drink from any colored flower, but the red is attractive to them, and bees don't see red, and so those flowers tend to have more nectar because the bees haven't been visiting as much. Not that a bee will go to a red flower and a hummingbird will go to a non-red flower, but in general those red flowers are like a big, like, right here, there's nectar for you. It's like a big sign for a hummingbird, like, eat here, right? All right, so we've got these amazing flowers. The hummingbirds are putting their little beaks in there, and their tongues are specially adapted. This is so cool. Their tongues are specially adapted to, like, they have a bifurcated tongue is what they call it. So it kind of opens up at the end and it has like almost like a tube type structure. And so it sticks it into the flower, it opens it up, and then it closes around the nectar and sucks the nectar back into its mouth. And scientists actually still don't quite understand how it swallows because it's drinking so fast. What did I saw this amazing thing, 20 licks per second. So talk about walking and like talking, chewing gum, patting your head and rubbing your belly. Yeah, like hummingbirds flapping their wings, 90 beats per second, licking the flower, 20 beats per second. They are just fast little creatures. So those tongues are sticking in there, they're wrapping around this nectar, they're pulling it back in, and then buzzing on to the next flower. So 20 beats per second, they'll stay at a flower for a few seconds and then move to the next one. Amazing, right? Scientists are actually really interested in hummingbirds for like different biomimicry, so where we create things based on things that we see in nature. So examples you could think of are like the swimsuits that are based on shark skin, right? Like shark skin, sharks move so quickly through the water. We've developed like scaly swimsuits that have similar aerodynamics, hydrodynamics as sharks. So in this case, they're thinking about like nanotechnology and tiny robots and like how can they take the physics that works in a hummingbird and apply it in human technology. So really cool stuff. I'll actually add that link as well to the description after we hop off live that talks more about that. But let's talk plants, because I promised you 10 plants you could add to your garden. So these will vary depending on where you live and what plants work in your yard. So you'll still need to do a little bit of homework, but if you grab a piece of paper, you can jot these down and I will come back and I'll add them to the comments after as well, actually. I have to remember to do this. Sometimes I'll say this on the video, like, I'll add it later, and then like kids arrive and it sometimes doesn't happen. But so I'm gonna give you the link to the tongue video / like the scientists at work, and then I'm going to give you the 10 plants. All right. Oh no, I have 11. 11. All right, number 1 is aloe. So this would be in places that are more semi-tropical, would be where aloes live, because there's not many aloes that live in places where it frosts, but aloes have a flower that hummingbirds drink from. So you can think about these hummingbirds, often most species are migrating, so they are moving through tropical, semi-tropical, temperate regions back and forth with the season. So aloe. Then there's bee balm, Monarda. So bee balm is a great one that's like supporting all kinds of pollinators, including hummingbirds. Number 2, no, I'm on number 3. My numbers are going to be off, sorry. Number 3, cardinal flower, lobelia. So this one is kind of the stereotypical flower that we think of, right? So they have that long tube, they've got a nice, the flower parts are up on the top, they've got a little tongue. Hi Chris, I can see that you're there, and who else is here? Tell me down below. Sometimes I can't see who you are until you comment, so thanks for the love. All right, so number 3 is cardinal flower. Number 4 is columbine. There's quite a few columbines that really work well for hummingbirds. So you should do a little research, because I bet there's one native to your region. Columbine, the Latin name for columbine is, it's the Spanish, it's related to the Spanish word for eagle. Let's see if I can say it. Aquilegia. You can correct me if you know better. But they kind of have like an eagle shape to them if you look at columbine. All right, so that was number 4. Number 5 is daylily. So daylilies are such a fun one to have in your garden, because they can be part of a planting where you have like spring bulbs. Because you know, if you have a big bed or a big group of like tulips and daffodils, they're great because they're early bloomers, they're feeding your pollinators early, they can be really useful in like an orchard because they help block grass from getting into your orchard. You can kind of use them as a little border to keep the grass from kind of encroaching. But then kind of by about this time of year, they're looking a little floppy. You got to leave those leaves on the daffodils, right? Because that is what feeds the bulb for next year's bloom. But what happens when they start to kind of look, well, if you have daylilies planted with them, the daylilies will start to look, when the daffodils start to look blah. And so they're a nice plant to put in together. And they're edible. You can cook the buds. You can eat the flowers of daylilies too, I think. So daylilies is number 5. All right, number 6 is this one. Do you recognize this? Hi, Richard. Do you guys know this plant? I should have brought a leaf in, because that would be a good clue. Whoop, you're off my list. All right, if you know it, type it in. I'm going to tell you. This one is scarlet runner bean. Scarlet runner bean. So this is a really nice climbing bean. It's great to use on this is what's planted on our bean teepee, which it's starting to climb. I'm excited. So that's another edible. You can grow it for the hummingbirds, and then you can eat the beans when they're young. You can eat them fresh, and then usually you're waiting for them to get big and you're eating the beans like soup beans, or you're drying them and saving them. All right, let me grab my list. All right, that was number 6, the scarlet runner bean. Number 7 is jewelweed. So if you live in a place where you have some swampy land, or land that holds a lot of water down near a creek bed, jewelweed will probably be growing there already in many parts of the country. But it's a great one for those nice moist soils. All right, number 8, penstemon. So penstemon is another native you can find a different variety in every probably region of the US. I think you can, yeah. So there'll be some that work well in arid regions, some that in temperate regions, but penstemon is a great one for lots of pollinators, including hummingbirds. And then we've got salvia, specifically Texas sage and scarlet sage are 2 good ones. So the salvia is the sage family. So our culinary sage would be in there too, but it may not be, because we've developed it for the leaves and the flavor, it may not be as good of a plant for hummingbirds as scarlet sage and Texas sage. All right, what are we on? Number 10, honeysuckle. Now, there's two kinds of honeysuckle. There's some native honeysuckles and there's Japanese honeysuckle. The non-native honeysuckle can get really aggressive and invasive. So you want to use caution. You want to look for those natives because they are going to be better food for our native birds, our native pollinators, hummingbirds and other insects. Not other insects, hummingbirds and insects. And so honeysuckle is a useful one, and it is another vine. And then number 11, the one we're finishing with, is kind of the featured plant, the trumpet vine. And so this is trumpet creeper is another name for it. Campsis radicans. Campsis radicans is your Latin name. I'm going to give you a picture of it. Oh goodness. Now, if I can get logged in here. Here we are. Okay, so look at that. Isn't that beautiful? This is a close-up shot of those trumpets. And this is from the picture from Wikipedia. Thank you, Stan Shebs, for contributing your picture to Wikipedia. So I do not have trumpet vine growing yet, but it's one that I would like to use in some places where we want some kind of quick shade. Because it's a vine, it can be a little bit aggressive, right? It can really like spread by suckers, and its stems can root. So like wherever the vine touches the ground again, it will root. But there's places in our yard, and there probably are some places in your yard where that would be okay, right? Where it's okay to have something like that. So it can grow in part shade. It does best in full sun, like you'll get more flowers in full sun. And let's see, it can grow from zones 4 to 9, so it's pretty hardy. And then, I love this, it can grow 25 to 40 feet high. Can you imagine? But you could think about having this be a part of your garden, and it can be growing up some trees in your garden. It could be growing up a trellis in your garden. You could mix it with other things so that you really have these pollinator plants mixed with your food plants, your herbs, the plants that you grow just because they're beautiful. So you can think about how that might mix in, right? Let's say you wanted to have a bed of lettuce that you could keep all summer long. Well, you could think about kind of creating a vegetable bed that's in the northern hemisphere, the east side of a trellis with that trumpet creeper, which is going to like shoot up. It's going to cover that trellis. You maybe need to think arbor, right? Like not just like a floppy trellis. Like this is going to be a nice woody vine, right? And it's perennial. It's going to come back year after year after year. So arbor is probably a better word for it. But can you imagine that you would have this nice arbor and it comes up and like maybe it goes this way to make some shade for you, and then it's going to provide shade from that western sun for your bed of things that can't quite take that summer heat. So you can think about how to incorporate it into your landscape so that you're feeding pollinators and you're enjoying that shade and just those beautiful bright orangey, yellow, reddish flowers. It's a very fun one to have. So that was the big list of hummingbird flowers. We are going to talk even more about awesome pollinator plants. We are going to really look at how do we create a menu, like a menu for those plants. So remember how we were talking about how those red flowers are like, eat here hummingbirds, eat here hummingbirds. We're going to talk about how you can make your garden send that message out to all the pollinators so that you are really connecting your garden to the diversity that's in your region. You're supporting those pollinators. In turn, they're going to support you by pollinating all your vegetable plants. And tomorrow we'll have one of my favorite pollinators and a vegetable plant as the example. So I will see you tomorrow about noon with one more pollinator plant pairing. And I would love for you to make it tomorrow night at 9 and join us for that more in-depth workshop. If you have questions about anything we've talked about this week, about anything pollinator related, there is a chance for you to put those in, and you can even win a door prize for entering a question over at that workshop sign up. So I would love to see you there. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching today. Until I see you again, happy gardening.